I'm going to suggest, Assalamu alaikum, everyone. We're going to open this, as always, with Al-Fatiha. This is not a numbered class because we're having an open session. The general topic is seeking Allah's help for troubling times. As I said, we're going to open with Al-Fatiha. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Alhamdulillah, Rabbil Alameen. Ar-Rahmanir Rahim. Maliki Yawmiddin. إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين.
Ameen.
As you,
Alhamdulillah.
as I'm sure you all know, this is the Quran weekly class and Halakha. We're not a bunch of experts teaching people who don't know anything. We're openly discussing what the Quran is telling us and how we understand it. Again, this is an open session and everyone is welcome. The last thing that was just said before the recording started was Sister Aisha reflected the fact that we mostly don't have the calmness to be able to judge other people's actions and impose harsh penalties most of the time. And that is why we have to be careful to properly apply the guidance that says basically in the Western world, they say count to 10 before you take any harsh action. I have a personal anecdote. I was sitting in a courtroom because of a traffic ticket, and a man came up. It was his turn, and he was very, very, ah, I'm trying to find a nice word. He was not very well behaved talking to the judge. Okay. He would interrupt and he would come just that close to, what do they call it? Being, officially,
Contempt of court.
that's the word I was looking for. I went blank on that. He seemed to know how to tiptoe the line around contempt of court and say things that would get under the judge's skin. And this elderly judge in a little county in Texas, you could tell that he was getting, and he told the man that this is what you need to do and don't leave the building until you do it. If you do leave the building, well, you will be charged with escape, and had the guy leave the courtroom until he got it done. He then turned to the rest of us, the judge did, and says, "Excuse me, folks, I'm going to do some work over here on my computer for the next 5 minutes because I'm very angry and I don't want to take it out on the next person who comes up." And that was a judge. He knew enough about what was in his own heart to say, wait a minute, I'm steaming. I don't need to take this out on somebody else. And he was fine. He spent a couple minutes doing some paperwork on his computer, turned back and called the next case. And no problem. When it was my turn, I said, I need to plead guilty. He says, you don't want to do that. And I says, what do I need to do? He says, why don't you do, you give me some instructions and no points on my driver's license. I loved it. But yes, we mostly do not have that self-awareness that judges need to step back and say, I'm not in a place right now to judge that person's actions. I mean, we see it in life all the time, road rage, okay? Guy nearly, sideswiped my wife just a day ago driving home from the shopping center on the freeway. And she only honked the horn, and I did not give the man a salute. You know what kind of salute I'm talking about. But I did kind of look.
There's a word in the Quran, it says Qazimul Ghaib. Ghaiz. Qazimul Ghaiz means somebody who controls his anger, controlling their anger. And I think a lot of people suffer because they could not control their anger. And even divorcing their wives and things like that. And they always regret later on, why did they utter those words that became the cause of immense regret later on, or remorse, So, Kazim ul Ghaiz, Kazim means somebody who controls anger. In fact, I wanted to name my first child, Kazim, and for some reason I did not do that, but it's a beautiful word that I think Kazim ul Ghaiz, somebody who controls the anger. And this is one of those signs for the moment, that moments when they do other things, and one of the things that they do is they control their anger. And I found out personally, I remember that word because whenever I feel angry, I immediately bring to my mind the word Kazim and the warning about that. And it helps me a lot. It helps me a lot. I bring down my anger immediately because I bring that word to my mind. And yes, I think that it's a controlling anger is a great attribute. It can save a lot of trouble in our lives.
And sometimes the Quran gives us those simple things like that one word, the one ayah, something that we can bring to mind. And I think that that's a real tremendous blessing, even if we barely understand anything about the Quran, or even if we have, we're struggling in our lives to do what we think is the best that we can do. Just having that little bit of knowledge, that little bit of awareness, I find to be a great blessing. That's why I think this group is so valuable, that we can come together even when it's not a scheduled class, because I hadn't thought of that ayah. Now I'm going to go and look that ayah up, right? Because we can remind each other, and that's one of the actions, right? Remind ourselves, remind each other with the Quran, because reminder benefits, right? And so even if we have absolutely no control over the big things that are happening, because we're not the ones making the decision of to send the bombers, to send the whatever, we have decisions that we can make in a moment in our own lives, right? And even if that decision is to take a breath and remember Allah, take a breath and remember the ayah from the Quran, right? That is something I think is really important. And that's why why I really value this group, because we come together to talk about the Quran. And I may see something in the Quran that you didn't see. You may see something in the Quran I didn't see. And we can really share those things with each other. Because the Quran is such an amazing book that nobody but Allah knows all of the depths of it. Right.
Mhm.
Brother Siad, we haven't heard from you. You're on mute if you don't know.
Sorry, sorry. Assalamu alaikum, everyone.
Nice, no.
You know, I think a lot, right? So I talk very little. And I often find myself that I have nothing to prove to anyone. So my voice, I kind of restrain myself all the time. Anyway, in 829, Surah 8, verse 29, there's a very interesting line. It begins with, of course, Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu. In tattaku, if you believe, if you are mindful of Allah, in tattakullah, right? Yaj'al lakum furkana. Very interesting. So then he will place or evolve in you this furkan, the criterion, the discernment, the ability to discern what is happening, right? In a given context. So I ask myself, it's not that I'm asking it today. I've been asking for quite some time now, since 2012. This is what is happening to us as a community, right? How is it that our imagination has been to a point where it's not just failed, our intellect has failed us, Muslim intellectuals, and our imagination has have failed us. And our prayers, our dua, our supplication to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, for last 2 years, every month of Ramadan, I do go to different masjid. So we all prayed for Gaza. Actually, for last 30, 40 years, I have noticed we prayed for Palestine a lot of stuff, lot of prayers. So I would ask the question to the scholars and the imams. You know, we have been praying so much for Gaza, for Palestine, for Somalia, for Kashmir. for destitute Muslims of India, how they suffer. There was a very interesting article today in Al Jazeera about a Muslim sister who lives in the street of New Delhi and how they survive, how their situation is. If you all are interested, look into that. Anyway, so my question was, how is it that Allah is not hearing our dua? 2 billion Muslims praying day in and day out, especially month of Ramadan. We are told, we are raising our hands. Some are crying in the masjid, right? So then I'm told by many, scholars that I know for a long time, oh, brother, this is a test for us. So then I ask myself how long the test is, right? But then they address it from this area of the Quran is a test, right? Bala or fitna. And then they forget the other area, other side. When you believe in Allah and hold firm to the rope of God, right? He can give you victory. He can give you upper hand. He can make you dominant and also increase you in your abilities to respond to a given situation in a way that is coherent. So now, again, the question that I'm asking myself, what is happening now? So I don't watch news that much unless I get some clips, someone tells me, because I do not like to listen to this computational propaganda news because how it is manipulated, managed in a way to manage my perception of things, right? So I'm very careful. But I do read very critical assessments of things, right? From special websites. So Hexet, the Department of DOD's, now it's renamed again, the leader, recently said something that blew my mind away. And almost like it is a new crusade, American crusade, right? And this is not really published in the legacy media anywhere, I noticed, but I actually saw the video clip of it, right? So we as Muslim, right? I'm looking at our Muslim rulers and monarchs in GCC countries and also Indonesia, Malaysia, Pakistan, Tunisia, Algeria, and I wondered if any of them condemned the aggression against Iran. I'm sorry, if I'm going too long, let me know, I will stop. So I noticed that none of the Muslim countries' leaders, none of them condemned this aggression publicly, privately, or whatever, right? Then I thought I should look into the scholars, ulama, right? Especially from, let's say, Pakistan, Saudis, Middle Eastern countries, and other Muslim countries. Not a single scholar in the West, even in the West, Zaitun Institute, right? And then Cambridge, Abdullah Hakim Murad, none of them condemned this aggression against Iran. So I'm kind of wondering, I mean, they're in the West, they have the freedom of speech, right? What happened to them? I get it. Saudis, they go to jail, they condemn it, right? I get it. Pakistanis might also go to jail. So you see, our situation is so not pathetic, not just, I mean, unreal for me because I'm dealing with in a grassroots level, a lot of young people, young Muslim men and women, right? Uh, it is very sad. They don't think that there is such a thing called Islam or Muslim exist anywhere. They don't see that. They are seeing total domination of Islam by these predatory capitalistic ideals where it is held over their head, and then, I mean, so anyway, so right now, as we are talking about this trust in God, ittaqullah, right? I think that's what you are talking about, Sister Aisha.
Yeah,
So,
yes.
you know, again, the ayah 829, right? يَجْعَلْ لَكُمْ فُرْكَانًا. And so I do often ask scholars, so how Allah is going to place this Furqan in us, right? And if he hasn't done that, we must have been doing something wrong for the last 30, 40, 80 years, right? Since Palestinian occupation is 1948. So we have to identify those. We are not really are not intellectually honest with ourselves. See, if you cannot define a problem, right, then the problem defines you. Okay, it is just common sense. So I know, for example, I this is recording, right? Oh man, I shouldn't be talking too much. I'm sorry. Anyway, because I do censor myself. See, we cannot define the problems. I noticed that the think tanks in the West, they define it for us and about us, right? And they do a lot of, not false flag, a lot of psyops against us globally, right? And then our rulers, our scholars, our pundits, right? They just gobble that up and say, "Oh, okay, now you have to do this," not thinking that end goal for these hegemonic ideals, right, is to always keep you divided, always keep you segmented so that they can control the narratives, right? So we have to really wake up and find and define the problem. And we're not doing that very good. We have to, I'm looking for people actually, right? I have found five, six people so far for my Quran project, right? That I'm working on. But I'm looking for intellectually honest Muslim, that are able to actually look at a situation, dissect it, and define the problem, categorize it, and find the data points that is missing, and look at the conditions, and then create new data points to match the conditions from the past, so that we can create a coherent, decisive narrative. That way, the condition that Allah has given us, that He will unite us, right? But we have to maintain certain level of literally the trustworthiness that we have given to Allah, that we will be also trustworthy with our duties and action, like you mentioned, 67:2, right? The ayah says, Alladina khalaqal maut. Allah created first mouth, the death, then life. Very interesting for me. Okay, with the physics background, it blows my mind away. It's if like a death is a creation itself, right? But anyway, without going too much into it, the next line, right? He will try us with the death and life. Very interesting, right? And our deeds. So we have gone somewhere wrong. My feeling is that, and we are not doing it proper our duty to God by trying to and not addressing the problem and then defining it. Okay. But anyway, I'll land there. I talk too much. Ya Allah, help us.
Well, what I see as a big part of the problem, and I say this as someone who came to Islam through the Quran without ever having heard of Islam before I read the Quran in translation, nearly half a century ago now. And subhanAllah, God gave me the motivation and the opportunity to study Arabic, and that's really how I came to this. But one of the problems I have begun to really see, especially in the last few years, it's amazing the longer you live, the more you see, right? Is that people really begin to focus or compete with who's believing correctly or who's doing the prayer correctly, or instead of saying we are all servants of Allah, the divine being, right? We're fighting over who's going to go to Jannah and who's not going to go to Jannah based on the activities that we do in the name of religion. And I'm not saying that there are no rituals. I do think that Salah is a ritual to connect to the divine, which in English is called prayer. And I see, and I've focused on Quran 548, which is in the midst of a discussion of the Torah and the gospel and the Quran and their relationship, right? And says, if God had willed, he would have made you a single community, but he's testing you. Same testing word we see in 67. So compete bil khairat, compete with one another. And instead of competing bil khairat, right? People are competing over my prayer is better than your prayer. God's not going to accept your prayer. God's only going to accept prayer if you do it my way. And so we're not focused on the right thing. And this applies not just to people who call themselves Muslim, capital M, or who follow the Quran. I think it applies to everybody, because what I see in Surah 5 is that the message of God has never been lost. People have tried, as we've said many times in this group, to bury it under all kinds of other things. but until we can make our focus the divine being and the actions that we do in this life. And if we think about what we say in Al-Fatiha, إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين, you, that's us speaking to God in the singular you, right? The intimate address to God. We don't say assalamu alayka, we say assalamu alaykum. We address each other formally using the plural, right? But when we're talking to Allah in al-Fatiha, we're talking to God intimately as the one divine being, and we're declaring that we serve, because I don't think na'budu really means we worship. I mean, worship kind of dilutes the action part of it, right? We serve, and we seek, help or needs, like daily needs kind of thing, nasta'in. And so that, I think a big part of the problem of not getting the Furqan developed is because the focus is on my way of doing it's right, your way of doing it's wrong. God loves me. God doesn't love you. God loves us. God doesn't love them. We're the people. They aren't, right? And that kind of group hostility, it exists between the Sunnis and the Shi'is, right? Because they're not focusing on what? They're not focusing on the bottom line, which is La ilaha illallah. And yeah, I see the problem as that simple, but also at the same time that's very complex, because human beings love their identity. And who was the first being, according to the Quran, who said, I'm better than him? You created me from fire. You created him from clay. My nature's better than his. And what do we see people doing? Our people are the best. Those people over there, they're not the best, right? They're savages. They're whatever. They're backwards. We are better. And so we have, and that's the other things. We have the shaitan as an active enemy, and he promised to God. This is a promise Iblis makes to God. I will wait for them on your straight path, not off to the side, not pulling them off to the side, on the straight path. And again, that's the Quran tells us that. And sometimes if we listen to just the very simple things like that the Quran says, that's what I try to do when I get really concerned about things. I pull those ayahs out of the Quran that really mean something to me, as you just said earlier about the controlling the anger. There are those special ayat that really have meaning for me.
Indeed. What
Sister,
you just pointed, go ahead.
sorry. Just brings to my mind a lot of people. In fact, I think vast majority of people, they believe that during Ramadan, a shaitan, the devil, is incarcerated, is chained for 1 month, right? And I said, well, why don't they read Quran? The Quran actually, Allah
Sorry,
subhanahu wa ta'ala
it's so true what you
has
said.
promised to the shaitan that, I'm setting you free. You go ahead, whatever you like. But whoever believes in me and who is the moment, they will not be obeying you. So to say that the devil is incarcerated or chained for a whole month, that means Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala went back on his promise. That's like a huge violation of the Quran, and nobody seems to know it. Once I mention that and say, brother, you are not a scholar. You're not a scholar. I said, well, I'm definitely not a scholar, but I'm telling you that I can give you the verse which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala promised to the devil that he's free till the day of judgment. So every year, if he incarcerates him for one
That's
whole
true.
month,
Yeah, it would be interesting, I think, to look up the background of that hadith. I'm not going to do it today. I have too much else I'm working on these days. But that brings the question, because that is definitely a hadith, not the Quran. There's definitely a hadith that I have seen that says, the shaitan is chained
Yeah,
up during
sure.
Ramadan. And I'm curious, but it'd be interesting to find out just this kind of the social political background of that. Because one of the things that studying hadith for all the decades that I've studied them and how they became authoritative among Muslims is people find these things, something valuable in it, right? And we see the same thing happening today, though, with YouTube videos and Facebook posts and all kinds of AI slop that's out there. People see something and it appeals to an existing bias or belief that they already have, and they say yes, and it comes from somebody they consider authoritative. So if they attribute it to the prophet and it comes to them through what they consider a reliable chain of narrators, and it makes sense to them, then that becomes the authority. But we see the very same thing happening, as I said, YouTube, Facebook, in influencers, we call them today. And I think that that's exactly what was happening in the days that the collections of hadith were compiled that people use today. And I don't even know if that hadith is in a canonized collection. That's how little I know about that hadith. But I've discovered there are a number of really famous hadith that are not in the canonized collection, but they meet people's kind of mental needs somehow, and so Muslims just pass them on even though they're not in the canonized collections. But and then when you say something, wait a minute, the Quran says this, that's exactly the answer. Well, I don't know, I'm not a scholar and neither are you. And that tells, what that does is shut down reading of the Quran. Like, how dare you try to read the Quran on your own, brother?
Actually, I heard that many times. They say that you cannot read the Quran on your own. You have to find some sheikh. You know what? A sheikh is somebody who's a scholar, a scholarly person, and you have to be his pupil, basically to learn the religion from him. So for them, sheikh is somebody that who teaches you the right religion, and that you do not have your own brain. Actually, you do not have your own mind. You cannot think. And they tell you that without a scholar, you cannot read the Quran. If you do that, that'll be, in fact, they call it sin, because you will be misled, according to them. And I say, well, I'm an educated person, whatever. I think I think I can understand. I can understand even the translation. Even in the
That's just your
translation, I can
pride.
understand probably. I don't have to be a scholar of the Arabic language. But looking at the translation, Brother Warid has actually a number of translations. That's a blessing for me, actually. I consult that all the time because he has many translations, from different people.
Yeah,
So if I'm
80
confused
something
about something,
now,
yeah,
right? It's a
Yeah.
huge number. I remember when it was only like 30 or 40, so I've been using the site
right.
for
I
a
mean, so,
long time.
yeah,
And I've been I recommend it to everybody and have for
I do
years
that same.
because
Yeah.
okay, I learned Arabic because I wanted to read the Quran in the original, and God gave me the opportunity to do that because that's kind of the nature of me as a person. I want to be able to read the original. But I don't think anyone needs Arabic to understand the Quran or to be guided. Now, you do need to know Arabic if you're going to make an argument about what the Arabic says, right? If you are going to make an argument to me that this verse means X, not Y, I want to know your linguistic argument, but you don't need Arabic to be guided. And I say that as someone who went all the way to doctoral level in Arabic language because that's just my nature and God gave me the opportunity. But you don't need Arabic to understand the Quran. You don't need a teacher to teach you because God is Ar-Rahman is the teacher of the Quran, the all merciful, the all compassionate, right? Ar-Rahman allama al-Quran. And I think that's Surah 55, if I'm not mistaken. But yeah, God can teach anybody. And I'm convinced that an illiterate person who hasn't the ability to physically read the Quran could still be taught by God, right?
All right.
And God will give them some kind of means of accessing the information.
I personally have a history where I have some sort of psychological block when it comes to learning foreign languages, foreign to me. I took 4 years of Spanish. I can't speak Spanish. I can order food in a Mexican restaurant. Beyond that, I can almost understand a conversation that somebody might be having if they're not saying something too fast or too complicated. Anytime I try to pick up a foreign language, something kicks in that just like wading through molasses. It doesn't matter how much time I spend on it. I have a hint what my childhood events were that caused that. At 72 years, I'm not going to go to a psychologist and
Yeah,
try to get it cured. I'm going to use translations, and that's pretty much the history of Islam awakened. If I can't learn Arabic, I'm going to listen to all these variations and see what they have in common. Like spread,
exactly, exactly. And the differences that you see will show you where sectarian differences lie
exactly.
in Islam. And all the parentheticals, anything in parentheses or brackets is not in the original text. It's
Yep.
something that the translator is reading into the text for one reason or another. And that will also tell you something about the sectarian leanings or the underlying assumptions of the translator. But I would still say that the basic message is never lost, because if you read all these different translations and, as you said, see what do they have in common, that's the bottom line. And God is the one who protects the vicar, the message. We have revealed the message and we are its guardians. 1519 or 159, I forget which it is. But y'all know
59.
which one, yeah, which one I'm talking about. And that's really true, because I knew no Arabic when I first read Arbery's translation of the Quran and went, wow, this is from God,
Yep.
you know? So,
What you
oh, the
mentioned
original
about
is Arabic? Okay. Yeah.
Sometimes why I learned Arabic, I can't speak Arabic at all, but it took me about 3 years to learn the Arabic grammar. And because I know Urdu, my own language, uses a lot of Persian words and a lot of Arabic words as well. And that helped me a lot, actually. So I could learn enough Arabic to understand the Quran. Something that bothered me was the word, for example, hur. Everybody said hur means beautiful women. And some people say beautiful women, white women, beautiful white women, right? And so this bothered me a lot. And I said, what about women? What would they get over there in the Jannah? It just bothered me a lot. So I actually got somebody had recommended a book. It was in Urdu. And they said, brother, read this book. And there's an explanation of the Arabic explanation of the word hur. And lo and behold, they said hur is actually a plural word. It's plural, but there are two singulars for it. One is haura and the other is ahwar. Ahwar is a good-looking man with whiteness and the contrast of whiteness and blackness of the eyes. That means just a beautiful man. It doesn't say gore means, it doesn't say white or nothing. It just said that whiteness of the eye and the darkness of the eye. Contrast, right? It's a beautiful man. Ahwar. And this is haura is just the same thing in female group, right? It's like a beautiful woman. Now, the plural of both these words, it's hur. So hur is a plural word. It's genderless because it refers to both genders, male and female. Now I went to Brother Wadid's translation. There are many translations now. People translate it as companions rather than beautiful women. The word hur has been understood for the longest time as beautiful women. But people have started asking questions now, right? So
How dare
because of
they?
that, for Shakal Kamar, that also actually, Shakal Kamar is chapter 54. The first verse is اقتربت الساعة وانشق القمر, right? And that the hour is near, and the moon split. The moon split. And you go to the tafsir and say, yeah, the Prophet was sitting and he he pointed at the moon and the moon got split or something like that. Then I said to myself, nobody has ever reported that kind of incident, all over the world. If it was such an important thing, people would have seen it, but it has not been reported. So it bothered me a lot. So I bought actually Lane's lexicon. And Lane's lexicon, I looked at the word one shekel cover, and they said that the Arabic people used to say anything which is new and groundbreaking. They would call it shakkal kamar. That means the moon has been split. That means that everything has become now obvious, open, and no secret now. It used to be secret, but not anymore, right? So everything has become obvious. They call it shakkal kamar. The moon has split. That means everything has become obvious, manifest. Then it made sense to me. All of a sudden, it made sense to me, right? So I think, yes, people who want to go a little bit deeper, I think they want to know the Quranic language. It's not very difficult, though. I understood it, but you see, I can't speak a single word. I mean, single sentence in Arabic. I cannot converse with somebody. However, when I read the Quran, I try to
Well,
understand
because
it.
reading and speaking are two very different cognitive skills that take very different kind of cognitive abilities. Speaking, reading, listening, writing they're related because they all relate to language, but they're different skills. And I will say that one of the things that I know about the idea that these are beautiful women rather than the more literal, as you're saying, companions, is Ibn Abbas is the narrator of hadith about the beautiful women in paradise. Thinking about who Ibn Abbas was an adolescent when Muhammad died, right? Ibn Abbas, what is an adolescent boy's view of paradise and the companions of paradise? Y'all don't have to tell me, y'all don't have to articulate it, but as a mother of a man who was once an adolescent boy, and any man I know who was once an adolescent boy, think about the mindset. And because paradise is going to be for different people what they're longing for from God. So when an adolescent boy, if you ask an adolescent boy, what kind of companions do you want in paradise? My experience as the mother of an adolescent boy who had adolescent friends is that they're thinking of beautiful girls, right? And so it makes sense when you think of it that way. But then the problem is when it becomes the authoritative religious view, because generations later, all anybody remembers about Ibn Abbas is that Muhammad asked God to grant him understanding of the Quran. Now, does that mean Muhammad said Ibn Abbas had good understanding, or that he was wishing that God would guide him to good understanding that he didn't currently have? I mean, he was like 13 when Muhammad died. He was an adolescent, right? And if you're going to take your religious understanding from adolescence, I think you want to be a little careful.
Right.
They say Hibrul Ummah. Hibrul Ummah means somebody who can translate, who understands and gives complete explanation of the Quran for the Ummah, for the entire Muslim nation. So if he's the authority, then we should not be listening to anybody else. We should be only listening to the adolescent Abdullah bin Abbas. That's what we should be doing. In other words, Jabir bin Abdullah, he was also a small boy, and a lot of hadiths are from him. So You're right. I mean, these people like Omar, Abu Bakr, Ali, they have been with Muhammad longest time. There are, from Ali, for example, Sunnis, there are many hadiths from Ali. The Shias, all their hadiths are from Ali and the descendants of Ali, like 12 Imams or something like that. However, Ali is a huge figure, not only for Sunnis, but Shias, but also for Sunnis as well. So, however, in Sahih Sitta, which is the 6 books of Hadith, the canonical books, uh, there are not as many ahadith. There are so many ahadiths from Abu Huraira, who lived only for 3 years with the, with the Prophet, right?
Yeah.
Only for 3 years. And what about Abu Bakr, Umar, Uthman, Ali? They lived for their entire lives. There's so little hadith from them.
Well, and they were the ones that were most skeptical of hadith too, and most skeptical, who are reportedly most skeptical of writing down the hadith, compiling the hadith. In fact, there's a very famous hadith. I don't even remember where it's from, but I write about it in my book, where Abu Huraira was was transmitting so many hadith that Omar got angry with him and threatened to beat him with a stick because he was just giving
Rattling
out all
himself
these
off.
stories. Exactly. And then he said, I became afraid of Omar, that Omar would beat me because of transmitting hadith, because Omar reportedly took all of this very seriously, and Omar is the one to whom there's a hadith related that on the Prophet's deathbed, when he allegedly asked for pen and paper to write something down, and Omar said, we have the book of God, and the book of God is enough for us. And Omar is the one who famously said, don't clothe the Qur'an in anything, or, don't clothe the Quran, don't dress the Quran up in anything, right? Now, people who want to follow hadith say, oh, that meant the short vowels and the markings on the letters, but my own work shows that it really had to do with the hadith and the kind of thing, because Omar also said, when he sent out governors, he said, don't distract people from the Quran with hadith, right? Um, so this is a problem that Muhammad's senior companions seem to have been aware of and concerned about, whereas Abu Huraira was just like, oh, let me tell you what the Prophet said.
Well, but they say that he lived very comfortable life because he was a favorite to the caliphs, the
Yeah.
Umayyad caliphs, right? He was a
Yes,
favorite, right? And Abu Huraira was made the governor of, I think, governor of, I don't remember, Baghdad or of Yemen or something. I think of Yemen, right? And
I
he,
don't remember where, but I know, but yes, he had status among, the following couple of generations because of his association with the prophet and his ability to tell them stories about the prophet, right? So
yes.
that got him status. Zayd ibn Thabit also had a lot of status because he was one of Muhammad's scribes who helped to write down the Quran and compile the Quran. And so the succeeding couple of generations took these people who were very young men at the time the prophet died and gave them great status in society. And it appears from what we know from history that some of them took advantage of this and did enrich themselves because of it.
Do
Some
we
of
not
the,
see people today who can tell the Caliph what he wants to hear and get positions of power?
Whether or not they actually merit those positions based
Right.
on their ability, but they have the stories. And hadith became, and one of the reasons that hadith became or came to have the status that they still do is because they had material in them that people needed to pursue a particular line of thinking, to impose particular types of laws. You have no greater authority on earth than the prophet, right? Because the whole obey the messenger became the basis of the authority of hadith for Shafi, who died 200 years after Hijrah, right?
Right.
And really laid the groundwork for it. But yeah, as you say, and I look around today and say, these are exactly the things that the Quran was describing. This is exactly what we see happening. Absolutely none of this is new, right?
Yeah.
We think, oh, we're modern, we're great, we're better than anybody in the past. Nope. No.
Yeah, right. Actually, I asked this question some years ago in the masjid uh, openly. I said to Imam, I said, Imam, I am a little bit confused. We say that there are two sources of the Quran, of Islam. One is the Quran, and the other is Sunnah or Hadith. And so, if Hadith is that important, then the Quran must mention it, and not only once or twice, a number of times.
Does tells us
However,
to avoid it.
I did not see any verse in the Quran. Well, Quran has used the word hadith many times. However, not even a single time. Quran never says hadith is like a saying of the prophets or prophet or the practice of the prophet or tacit approvals of the prophet. That's what hadith is defined as. And so in fact, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that Allah says, Nazzala Ahsan al-Quran, Ahsan al-Hadith. Quran is the best hadith. Quran is describing itself hadith. And say, فَبِأَيِّ حَدِيثٍ بَعْدَ اللَّهِ وَآيَاتِهِ يُؤْمِنُونَ. What other hadith do you believe other than the Quran, other than the ayat of the Quran? So I said, well, these are very clear verses. Why should we believe in any other hadith? Oh, no, hadith means message or something like that, okay? I said, I don't want to translate hadith as message. I just want to I want to keep this word hadith because you are choosing this word hadith. So I think there was some little bit bad taste in everybody's mouth, and people starting, brother, do not confront the imam. Do not confront the imam. I said, I'm not confronting, I'm asking them, maybe I'm missing something. Maybe there is a verse which says that follow the hadith of the prophet. I did not see that. Oh, no, because it says follow the messenger. You know, I said, that's
Not
not
what it
what it
says.
said. Of course, I'm following the messenger. If I were not following the messenger, I would not be following the Quran. The Quran was revealed to him, to his heart, and through him to all of us, you know. And so if I don't follow the Prophet, I, I cannot really, I cannot believe in the Quran then. As I follow the Prophet. Anyway, I think this is something that many people, they think hadith is in the Quran. No, it's not. Not that I know of, anyway.
Right. They don't understand, because one of the things that I have really noticed in studying a lot of Muslim intellectual history, and I prefer to say Muslim intellectual history than Islamic history because Islamic gives it kind of authority religiously, is that people in the last maybe 150 or 200 years, their view has narrowed. If they knew all of the things that Muslims were discussing 1,200 years ago, 1,300 years ago, they would be surprised about the disputes. But it's become very narrowed, and they have never asked what you were asking. What is the basis of this, right? How did the Sunnah become linked to Hadith, right? How did the Sunnah become the Sunnah of the messenger? Because the word Sunnah just means the trodden path, the way people have done things. The Sunnah of the Arabs was this, the way they traditionally did things. And it wasn't until Shafi was, I still have not found anyone earlier than him, the one who said, Sunnah means Sunnat Rasulullah. Malik didn't even think that. Malik was Shafi's teacher. Malik was like the Sunnah of the Prophet, the Sunnah of the people of Medina, right? And then Shafi's like, no. Must be the Sunnah of the Messenger. And Shafi really had an intense love for Muhammad, who died long before Shafi was ever born. But Shafi had that love for him that really, to me, looks very much like shirk, right? I was that was the feeling I got when I was reading all the great things Shafi said about Muhammad, being a light. That it's similar to, how the Shi'is say, the lights are Ali and Fatima, and God created these people first. Shafi had something similar he said about Muhammad, and he's really the one who insisted Sunnah is Sunnah to Rasulullah, and Hadith are, the only way we can access the Sunnah. And Muslims don't realize that. They just think that, you know, Sunnah means the Sunnah of the Prophet. And as you said, they've defined it, what he said, what he did, and what he tacitly approved of. But they have no idea when that formulation actually occurred. And it's like Brother Walid has said many times, isn't there's like this 300-year mark, right? 200 to 300 years after the message that God sent. People work on it for a few hundred years, and voila, we have a religion.
Right.
Yeah. If you
I
notice, they will quite often cite that Muhammad is uswatun hasanatun, the
Right.
excellent example. Sometimes I'll translate that as perfect example, and that obviously should mean that he's the one we should follow, and that's why hadith are important. But they don't notice that in 60 verse 4 and 60 verse 6, Ibrahim was also an Uswatan Hasunatun, and so
Right.
were companions of
Right.
Ibrahim. So,
Abraham and the people that were with him.
yeah,
Yeah.
so there's only
right.
one book that has all three examples, and that's the Quran.
Exactly.
Yeah, Ibrahim, not only Ibrahim, his followers. So we
Yeah,
should follow that sunnah as well, right? So
right.
if we believe that, then Prophet Muhammad himself, Quran says that himself, creed of Abraham, he's following himself and the creed of Abraham. So his sunnah is being followed by the Prophet himself. So what is sunnah then? Basically sunnah is described in the Quran completely. I heard a story from a very good scholar. A good scholar means somebody who was known as a good scholar. I don't know whether he is or not, but he was known. He said he narrated a very strange story of Abu Yusuf. Abu Yusuf was the pupil of Imam Abu Hanifa. Imam
Yes.
Hanifa. So Abu Yusuf, he became the Qazi al-Qudah, the Chief Justice. So when he was appointed the Chief Justice, so he invited everybody to his house for a dinner. It was a banquet. So he had prepared many dishes. So elite of that city, they I think it was Baghdad, right? They gathered together and they're going to start the eating now. And he said that everybody should start from kaddu. Kaddu is what? It's wow, a pumpkin? No, not pumpkin. It's a vegetable. It's a
Yeah, it's a squash. It's like
squash,
they
right?
often
Exactly.
translate it as,
Squash.
yeah, they oftentimes people say pumpkin because pumpkin is a particular kind of squash, but yeah, a
Yes.
squash.
Anyway, it was a squash. That's a long one. That's a green long one, right?
Yeah.
And so he said everybody should start from this dish first, and then they should move around the circle and start eating other dishes. Well, everybody did that except one person, and he did not start from that. He started with some other dish, and so Abu Yusuf told him, "I thought I mentioned that everybody should start from this dish. You should start from kaddu, from that." And he said, no, no, I don't want to. He said, why? He said, because I don't like this. I don't like this vegetable. And he said, well, let me tell you, Prophet Muhammad liked it. He loved it. So he said, well, he may have liked it, but I don't like it. He was so furious. We're talking about Qasim al-Qais. He was so furious. He asked the executioner. He said, executioner. He called the executioner. He said, take him away and behead him. So
Wow.
he was beheaded. So these are the people who are the scions of Sunnis, right? And believing Abu Yusuf. They said Imam Abu Yusuf. He was a murderer, right? He murdered somebody that died.
How
people.
dare you not like the food the
Yeah,
prophet
right,
liked? Yeah,
exactly. It's a
right.
strange thing, right? It's a,
Yes, Linda, people do say the Hadith are required to understand the Quran. That's a really common modern day belief. I have not looked into when people said that, but Shafi's the argument that Shafi made, because he's the person who really laid the foundations for the status of Hadith as they are today. In his discussions with rejectors of Hadith in his day, uh, he made the argument that if you can do whatever you want and call it salah, or pay whatever you want and call it zakah, charity, and still be following the Quran. And that's a serious problem. So Shafi was looking for uniformity in practice. That was one of his big goals. So they say, and that's why the first thing that Muslims will usually say, if you question the authority of Hadith, well, if we don't use Hadith, how do you know how to pray?
Always.
That is the first question they always ask. They want details of how to pray, and that comes out of Hadith. Although it doesn't come out of Hadith the way they think it does, because there is no Hadith that describes how to pray from beginning to end, step by step. No Muslim ever has learned to pray from the Hadith. Every person learns how to pray from other people who are doing it. And they have certain Hadith that they can point to that showed the Prophet did a particular thing, or various different things, depending. Because when the Prophet was ill, he prayed sitting down. Right. But the Quran also says that people can pray sitting or standing,
Lying
sitting,
on their
or
side.
lying on their sides. And as a disabled person, I've always recognized that you have to have a variety of ways of doing things, because not of all, just because ordinary people, most people's bodies function a particular way, not everybody's does. God makes allowances for all of that, but people learn to pray from other people. They never learn to pray just from Hadith.
that's true. In fact, once I actually made a claim, I said, well, I give you 6 books of Hadith. And somebody becomes a Muslim and he becomes expert in Arabic. Ask him how to pray reading all these books. Give him 6 months or 1 year to read all these books and then come to me and say, okay, this is the right way of praying. Because there's not,
Not in there.
yes, absolutely. I mean, you'll be completely confused if you go through all those things. You won't be able to actually find out how to pray properly. And also the the Shi way of praying is quite different actually. For
Yes,
example,
it's just a little bit different.
they say that if you fold your hands, your prayer is not accepted. She also say that if you say Ameen, and your Sunnis, they say Ameen very loudly and very long. Ameen. They think that if we prolong it, then the angels also say Ameen. And if your Ameen and angels Ameen coincides, then all your sins will be forgiven. That's what they can do. That's why I say Ameen. She says that if you say Ameen, your prayer is invalid. Yeah. So you have to pray again. Right. So according to Shi's faith, no Sunni has ever prayed right.
And according to Sunni, Shiis aren't even really Muslim, because there's some kind of, Rafidite or something. They're
Right.
rejectors of something, right? People are really good at saying, you're not really Muslim. We are, right?
Right,
And
right.
and
This
that
comes. Go ahead. Sorry, Lizzie.
I was just going to say, that's a violation of 548 in my view. God made you
Yeah,
multiple communities. He's testing you with what he gave you, right?
yeah, right.
This takes us right back to what Brother Syed brought up earlier in the discussion. Why is nobody speaking up against the attack on Iran? Because they're Shias. They're those people. No, but Americans aren't bombing us.
Right. And
That's the
notice
other
here,
thing. They don't want the Americans to bomb them. See, that really is, it really shows the mindset these people in Saudi Arabia, the guardians of the two holy
Yep.
shrines.
God says,
Yeah.
"Fala takhshawhum wakhshawni." Do not be afraid of them. Be afraid of me. That's what the
Me.
Rasul says, yeah? فَلَا تَخْشَوْهُمْ وَاخْشَوْنِي. It said that several times. See, the thing is that I know it was a joke. Somebody said the only brother of 56 sisters, because there are 57 countries, that says Iran is the only brother of 56 sisters. So somebody said at least one of them should have sex exchange. At least it will be two of them. So I don't know. See, it's kunut is they say that kunut is done when somebody's making badua. Badua means not wishing right, and evil wishes, sometimes wishing evil, right, for somebody. Kunut. And I've been praying every day for the last two years, and our imam did kunut during the Fajr time, on a regular basis, because it was a Gazan, the conflict of Gaza with Israel. Now, because Iran is in trouble, I have not seen anybody praying or even mentioning that we should have kunut as well. First of all, kunut did not do anything for the last 2 years. You know, it's because our character. Are we? It's a big question from me to all of us. Are we the mu'mineen? Are we the mu'min? I question that. Because if we were mu'min, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said that, antumul a'launa in kuntum mu'minin. We will give you success, victory, if you are a mu'min. So we are not getting
Well, and that's what Saeed was saying earlier, is that's a sign for us in the world. But then again, I don't think any country in the world is mu'min. I don't know if a country is able to be mu'min.
Individuals.
It really has to be a group of individuals. And it seems to me that a lot of the individuals, especially the ones in power, are more like the people of Lut. And it doesn't matter whether they can call themselves Muslims or Christians or Jews, they are cutting off the highways, they are doing horrible things in their assemblies. They are really doing evil things in the world. And it's just a bunch of evil people doing evil things against each other, right? And I don't think that the Gulf countries are necessarily any shining examples of Muslim anything, regardless of the fact that they have Mecca right in their midst. I mean, so did the pagan Arabs, right? And what is it that God says? There will be people that build a mosque of division, right? And don't pray in that mosque. Again, that might have been, yes, the people of the past, but how does it apply
Now,
to the people today, right?
There's a strange hadith actually, which probably is maybe true. I don't know. The Prophet said that you will be at some point in time, you will be eaten like dishes on a spread. What's that spread? What do you call it? Spread. That's the
table.
fun. Anyway, I mean, so you'll be eaten like everybody would like to eat you because eat you up. And they said, does that mean that we will be few? We will be lesser in number? He said, no, you'll be like scum. You'll be scum on the ocean. So, millions and millions of them, in other words, right? And I said, but why would be defeated? And he said, the reason is that you will have the fear of death. Vahan means fear of death. You will have Vahan. So what is Vahan? And he, according to the report, he said Vahan means fear of death, that you will be afraid of death. So I don't know. I mean, look at that. Now there are 1.5, at least 1.5 billion Muslims. That's the population of Muslims here, right? Jews are only like 100, let's see, 15 million maybe in the entire world, right? And if we look at Surah Anfal, I think verse number 65 and 66, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, you will be 20 and they will be 200 and we will give you victory. But because you are, now the next verse says that because we find some weakness in you, even then you'll be 20 and you'll be able to defeat 40. In other words, you have to give 2 and 1 ratio. So I said, okay, now look at the ratio. Muslims versus whatever their enemy, right? It's just the opposite now. So we are so weak. Yes. So weakness is weakness of faith, of course. That's what I take it. And I think, why don't we read the Quran so that we know why are we going down the drain?
I
I think
want to believe that the current foolishness in American leadership is going to wake up enough of the American populace that they're going to turn away from Israel and stop backing the Zionist regime. I have nothing against Jewish people. There's a rabbi that I follow on Facebook, Lee Weissman. He gives some amazing information. He'll study the Psalms and go through the translations, kind of like I do with Islam Awakened. And these people are our spiritual cousins. Zionism is not Judaism. Zionism is just a form of racism. And
Right.
America is beginning to wake up to the different. And that's a blessing. And if it takes throwing somebody like Donald Trump into the White House to get America to wake up to how evil some of this is, fine. I think Sister Aisha, you mentioned the white racists say that he was a gift from God. Well, yeah, but not the way they think.
Not the way they think. Exactly. And Trump's own base of supporters are starting to turn against him over the cost of this war,
Yep.
right? The Pentagon wants another $200 billion for furthering the war in Iran. And Linda, yeah, I saw what you just said. If you're not at the table, you're on the menu. And I
Right.
was thinking about in Arabic, the phrase of eating someone or consuming someone has to do with an idea of consumption and depletion, right? That taking advantage of somebody to the point of using them up in a consumption sort of way. And so that hadith may very well have been an attempt to predict that. And just because hadith are not a source of guidance doesn't mean some of them are true. I mean, some of them may be true, some of them may be false. The point is, don't put your faith in anything other than Allah wa ayatihi, which are the ayat of Allah in the Quran and the ayat of Allah in nature, in the horizons, and in ourselves, right? So that doesn't mean there's no truth in any of the stories that people tell. It just means that whatever truth is there isn't something we should necessarily put our faith in. But yes, Americans are starting to really turn against Israel. And it's not a turn against Judaism, because I argue that support for the modern state of Israel, and I'm not the only one who argues this, is actually the ultimate manifestation of Euro-American anti-Semitism. Jews are not safe anywhere in
Oh,
the world except Israel. Send them there. That means they're not safe here in the United States. They're not safe in European countries because of anti-Semitism. So send them over there, and all the Semitic people can fight each other over it, and we don't care if the Semitic people kill each other. That's anti-Semitism right there. I don't think you can support the modern state of Israel the way it is without being anti-Semitic. I think it's ultimately anti-Semitic. And you're right, the Jews and the Christians and the Muslims are cousins. What the Quran is opposed to in Christianity It's not Christians. It's the concept of Trinity and divine sonship, right? Other than that, the Quran tells the people of the gospel, judge by what God sent down in it.
Yep.
How do you know what God sent down in it? You use the
Read the
Quran as
scriptures.
the filter, right? You read the scriptures together, and the Quran shows you what people added into the scripture, right? You read the scriptures together, and you see what? One God. We all worship one God, and 548 says compete with one another in the good things. You will all return to God, and God will inform you of those things about which you differed.
Yeah.
With that, I would like to recommend we close down because we're
Okay.
past an hour.
Oh, well, Alhamdulillah.
Yeah.
It's
Alhamdulillah.
been a lovely meeting.
Allah be with all of you.
Inshallah khair.
Inshallah.
Jazakumullah khair. We'll see you next week. We're starting up